I never thought betrayal could have so many faces. Mine came in the shape of wedding rings, divorce papers, and family photos turned face down. My name doesn't matter much now. What matters is what happened to me, and how the people I trusted most in the world vanished like smoke when I needed them most. At 22, I was young and foolish, but God, I was in love. Amy had been my everything since high school, that dimpled smile, the way she'd loop her arm through mine when we walked. We'd grown up on the same street, shared first kisses behind the bleachers, dreamed about our future on countless starlit nights. When I slipped that ring on her finger, I thought I was sealing a promise that would last forever. Till death do us part. Funny how those words echo differently now. For 3 years, we built what I thought was a life. Weekend barbecues with my parents, Sunday dinners where my sister would tease us about having kids. Amy and I painted walls together, argued about furniture, made love on our new couch. Normal. Perfect. Or so I believed. Then came that Tuesday. Nothing special about it, just an ordinary day until I found the papers on the kitchen counter. Divorce. The word looked alien, impossible. When I confronted her, Amy's eyes were cold, distant galaxies I couldn't reach anymore. I just don't love you anymore, she said. Simple as that. As if love was a light switch she could flip off. No explanation. No real reason. Just done. But the true knife twist came after. I called my mom, desperate, voice breaking. We can't talk to you right now, she said. Click. My father's number, straight to voicemail. My sister's door, unanswered knocks. It was as if someone had orchestrated a perfect vanishing act. My entire family, gone. I later learned that Amy had somehow convinced them I'd done something unforgivable. What exactly? No one would tell me. The whispers and rumors spread, but no one would speak to me directly. Family gatherings continued without me. Holidays moved forward as if I'd never existed. You don't understand true abandonment until you've stood outside your childhood home, seeing the warm glow of lights through windows, hearing laughter inside, knowing you're no longer welcome. I stood there in the rain once, pathetic, hoping someone would notice me. No one did. My friends, real friends, became my lifeline. Mark let me crash on his couch for months. Sarah brought groceries when I couldn't afford them. They listened to me cry, rage, break down, and slowly, painfully rebuild. This is how I learned that family isn't always blood. Sometimes family is who stays when everyone else walks away. And sometimes, the cruelest betrayals come from those who promised they never would. I refused to let their rejection define me. Some nights, I'd wake up gasping, phantom memories of my old life still clinging to me like cobwebs. But mornings came regardless, and with each sunrise, I found my spine straightening just a little more. Mark noticed it first. You're cooking again, he said one evening as I set down a plate of pasta that wasn't from a box. The simple act of creating something, of transforming raw ingredients into something nourishing, had awakened something dormant inside me. Remember that restaurant idea you always talked about? Sarah asked over coffee one morning. The one Amy always said was impractical. I remembered. I also remembered shelving that dream, tucking it away behind wedding albums and mortgage payments. What if now's the time? She pushed. Desperation makes for strange courage. With my friend's help, I secured a small loan and found a modest space downtown. The first 6 months nearly broke me. 18-hour days, sleepless nights calculating costs, and the gnawing fear of another failure. But this pain felt different. It was mine. It was earned. Then something unexpected happened. Success. People came. They returned. They brought friends. One location became 2, then 3. Hotels followed. The boy who wasn't good enough for his wife or family somehow became a man others wanted to work for. Restoration Group announces expansion to West Coast markets. Read the business headlines. In boardrooms where I once would have felt like an imposter, I now moved with quiet confidence. The wound of betrayal hadn't healed completely. I doubt it ever will. But it had scarred over, becoming part of my strength rather than my weakness. And then I met Claire. Not in some dramatic fashion, but in the mundane beauty of everyday life, arguing over the last blueberry muffin at my favorite cafe. She didn't know my history at first, and when I finally shared it, she held my hand and simply said, "Their loss." Our wedding was small. Her family embraced me with an easiness that still sometimes makes my throat tighten. When our daughter was born, I held her tiny hand and promised that she would never know abandonment. The invitation to appear on Entrepreneurial Journeys came as my 10th restaurant opened. Share your story, the producer urged. People need to hear about resilience. I agreed, not knowing that among the thousands who would watch would be eyes I once knew intimately, eyes that had looked away when I needed them most. The interview aired on a Thursday. By Friday morning, my office phone was ringing. My assistant's voice wavered unusually when she said, "There's a woman calling. She says she's your mother." Sometimes life's most profound moments arrive disguised as ordinary days. As I reached for the phone, I realized the betrayal that once defined me had become merely one chapter in a much larger story. I stood frozen behind my desk, staring at the ghost who had materialized in my office doorway. My mother, her face a roadmap of new wrinkles. My father, smaller somehow than in my memory. My sister, fidgeting with her wedding ring. And behind them, Amy. 20 years had passed since I'd seen any of them, yet here they were, intruders in the life I'd built from their ashes. "We saw you," my mother whispered on that show. The silence that followed felt like drowning. My assistant hovered uncertainly in the hallway until I nodded for her to close the door. "You look." My father started, then faltered. "Good? Successful? Not broken by their betrayal? Why are you here?" My voice sounded foreign even to me, cold, controlled, nothing like the desperate young man who had once begged them for explanations. They exchanged glances, a familiar choreography of family secrets. Finally, Amy stepped forward. "I think you deserve to know the truth," she said. Her voice still carried that slight tremor when she was afraid. All of it. And then came the avalanche, words that rearranged the landscape of my past. Amy hadn't just left me. She'd been sleeping with my cousin Carl. My family hadn't just abandoned me, they'd made a calculated choice to preserve relationships with Carl's influential father, whose connections had secured my sister's medical school admission and financed my parents' retirement. "We were cowards," my sister admitted, tears streaming down her face. "We chose what was easy over what was right." I gripped the edge of my desk, knuckles whitening, as Amy delivered the final blow. "There's something else," she said, pulling out her phone. The screen illuminated with the face of a young woman, 19, with my mother's eyes and my jawline. "This is Emma. She's your daughter." The room tilted dangerously. "My what?" "I was pregnant when we divorced. Carl, he's raised her as his own. 20 years. 20 birthdays. 20 Christmases. A lifetime of firsts I would never recover." "She doesn't know about you," my father said quietly. "But she's asking questions now." The rage that surged through me was primal, not the impotent anger of my youth, but something deeper, more dangerous. They had not only stripped me of my family, but had stolen my chance at fatherhood, all while maintaining their comfortable lives, their holiday gatherings, their family photographs with spaces where I should have been. "Get out," I whispered, then louder, "Get out." They flinched collectively, these people who shared my blood but had sacrificed my heart on the altar of convenience. "We thought we were protecting everyone," my mother pleaded. "Carl's father threatened to ruin us all. And I wasn't worth fighting for?" The question hung between us, the same one I'd asked myself in countless dark nights. My sister reached for my hand across the desk. I pulled away, but not before she pressed a folded note into my palm. "Emma's contact information," she whispered. "Whatever you decide about us, she deserves the choice we never gave you." As they filed out, shoulders bent under the weight of their confessions, I realized that the family I'd lost had never truly existed. But somewhere out there was a daughter who might still be found. For weeks after their visit, I lived in limbo. Emma's contact information burned in my desk drawer like radioactive material, too dangerous to touch, too valuable to discard. My wife, Sarah, the only person who had stood by me through 20 years of chosen solitude, held my hand as I navigated this emotional minefield. "Whatever you decide," she whispered one night as we lay in the darkness, "I'm with you. But ask yourself if you can live with never knowing her." She was right. The possibility of a daughter had cracked open something primal in me, a hunger that couldn't be silenced. With Sarah beside me, I crafted a message, not too desperate, not too casual, explaining who I was and why I'd been absent from her life. We sent it through social media, that strange modern bridge between strangers who should be family. 3 excruciating days passed before Emma responded. Her message was cautious but curious. "I've always felt something was missing. Mom and Dad have been acting strange since I started asking questions. I think I'd like to hear your side." We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe halfway between our cities. Sarah offered to come, but this was a journey I needed to take alone. When I saw Emma walk through the door, time collapsed. My mother's eyes, my jawline. But her walk, her presence, those were entirely her own. I wasn't sure I'd come, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. I've spent the last week piecing together a lifetime of lies. For 3 hours, we talked. I told her everything. How I'd loved her mother, how I'd been cast out, how I'd never known she existed. She listened with remarkable composure, asking precise questions that revealed an analytical mind. I always wondered why I didn't look like my dad, like Carl, she said, tracing the rim of her coffee cup. Last year I needed medical history for a college form, and things just didn't add up. When I confronted them, they crumbled. There was no Hollywood embrace, no instant father-daughter bond. Instead, there was something more valuable: honesty. Emma told me she needed time to process this seismic shift in her identity. I've told Mom and Carl I need space, she said as we prepared to leave. What they did, lying to me my entire life, I can't just sweep that aside. But I don't want to punish you for their choices either. She suggested we email weekly, perhaps meet again in a month. As she walked away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: hope. The betrayal that had defined my life was transforming into something else, the possibility of connection, of knowing this remarkable young woman who carried my blood. On the drive home to Sarah, I replayed Emma's parting words. I don't know what we'll be to each other, but I'd like to find out. In that moment, it seemed enough, this chance to build something true from the ashes of so many lies. The weeks following my second meeting with Emma unfolded like a delicate negotiation between past and future. Our email exchanges grew from cautious to candid, each message building a bridge over 20 years of absence. When she finally agreed to visit our home, to meet Sarah, I spent hours pacing, wondering if this fragile connection could bear the weight of my anger, which still burned beneath the surface. I'm not a saint. The rage I harbor toward my parents remains justified. They didn't just exile me from their lives, they stole my daughter's childhood from me, piece by precious piece. Every first step, every lost tooth, every birthday candle blown out in my absence now forms a void I can never fill. That theft cannot be undone with apologies or explanations. They've been calling me daily, Emma confessed during her visit, curled in our living room armchair, looking so much like her grandmother it made my chest ache. Mom's been crying. Dad, Carl, barely speaks. They keep asking when I'm coming home. And what do you tell them? Sarah asked gently, bringing us coffee. That I'm still figuring things out. Emma met my eyes directly. They told me they maintained contact with your parents all these years, my biological grandparents. They've been sending photos, updates. Apparently they've been in the audience at 3 of my dance recitals without me knowing. The betrayal crashed through me anew. My own parents conspiring, watching my daughter grow while keeping me in darkness. The perfect punishment, allowing me to believe I was completely alone while they secretly maintained ties to the life that should have included me. What will you do? I asked her, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. I don't know yet, she said. But I do know that I'm tired of having others decide what family means for me. That night, after Emma left with promises to return, I sat with Sarah under the stars in our backyard. The weight of decades of isolation pressed against my shoulders, but something else was there too, something lighter. I won't forgive them, I said. Not my parents. Not her mother. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Sarah's fingers interlaced with mine. You don't have to. But I won't let bitterness define what happens next, I continued. That's what they did. They let their disappointment in me dictate 20 years of lies. I've learned that family isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's built on trust, on showing up, on choosing to heal rather than harm. My parents and Emma's mother chose deception. They'll face the consequences of that choice in Emma's guarded heart, in my enduring anger. But here's the miracle I never expected. In the wreckage of so much betrayal, something new is growing. My daughter calls me by my first name, not Dad. That title belongs to the man who raised her, whatever his flaws. But she calls me, and that's enough. Out of all the broken promises and stolen years, we're building something honest. Something real. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about absolving others of their sins. Sometimes it's simply deciding they won't determine your future. As Emma's car disappeared down our driveway that evening, I realized I was finally free, not from anger, but from letting that anger consume what remained of my life.